Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Dan Pugh.
And I'm Shauna Harrison. Each week, we take an idiom or other turn of phrase and try to tell the story from its entry into the English language to how it's used today. Since I was a young child, I've been fascinated with the various practices around the world focused on remembering the dead. This included mummies and their pyramids in ancient Egypt, and the simple unmarked tombs for those whose names were unknown. As I got older, there was one question that kept coming up in studying this part of humanity, particularly in the U.S. Who in the world is John Doe?
That is a wonderful question, and I'm very excited to learn more about this term, John Doe.
John Doe is used to refer to a person whose legal name is unknown. This usage is wide-ranging and could be applied to a fugitive on the FBI's most wanted list or a deceased individual who is yet to be identified. John Doe is also used as a placeholder name, often implying this could be anyone. For example, this could happen to John Doe down the street. According to Oxford English Dictionary, John Doe is, quote, a name given to a hypothetical person or one whose name is unknown or withheld, especially an unidentified victim of a homicide or fatal accident. Also, a name given to a hypothetical ordinary or average man, end quote. Here is an early example from 1593 from the work The Order of Keeping a Court Leet by Jonas Adams. Okay.
What did you just say?
Yeah, okay. The Order of Keeping a Court Leet. Now, we're not keeping the court like leet.
Keep that court leet. Yeah.
We're not keeping it in a status of leetness, I guess. I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
Instead, a court leet refers to a type of local court or jurisdiction. It's often tied to a manor that handled minor criminal offenses, disputes, and local governance. The term leet comes from Old English, meaning a division or a share of land.
Okay.
So it's just referring to the court's role of managing local legal matters within a defined district.
That is not at all what went through my head when you said that. So thanks for the clarification on that one.
Because I was about to be just broken over the fact that this was going on in 1593.
It's like, oh my gosh, everything is cyclical. It's all come back again. When are we going to start saying forsooth again? I can't wait.
I'm ready for that one. Can bring it. Forsooth. Here's the excerpt. Quote, after the style of the court entered, you shall cause the bailiff to cry once, oyez, and then call the jurors. Example, John Doe, Richard Roe, John Den, Richard Fenn, etc. End quote.
Huh.
So this is a great example because it is using John Doe as a stand-in for an average person or a juror. And this work also ties John Doe with another fictitious name that was often used in courts at the time, Richard Roe.
Yeah.
And in fact, you may recognize the name Roe from a more recent court case, Roe versus Wade, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later in the episode.
All right.
The question is, though, why were these particular names used as placeholders? The real answer is that we don't totally know, but we know where they came from at least. The names John Doe and Richard Roe were used in the place of real names or people for court cases regarding land disputes. Property law is immensely complicated.
Citation needed.
But I'm going to attempt to explain what was happening in these cases in medieval England. England's legal system was based on common law, which was developed over centuries through precedent and not legislation. Resolving property ownership often involved tracing land transfers through generations, which was complicated by feudal customs and inheritance rules.
That is actually how many countries still do property ownership.
And imagine trying to track back every land transfer that occurred for a place. That would be a lot of work. Legal representatives, for simplicity's sake, let's call them lawyers, would present an action of ejectment to the court. Ejectment was a way to determine who should have rightful possession of the land.
That's weird. That's not knowing that, just thinking of the concept of ejecting. I certainly didn't think it's like, well, it's mine now.
Yeah.
What? I guess you've ejected everyone else from the process.
Right.
But
This would be more like, yeah, it was like kind
let's
of.
just
It's
listen. We're gonna do some yeeting in the court leading, and we will be fine.
Yes, exactly. Here's the basic format of these legal proceedings. There are two parties involved. Party A is the actual owner of the land. Party B is the person currently occupying or possessing the land. In the case, Party A, the owner, claims that their fictitious tenant, John Doe, is being illegally evicted from the land by Party B. The person occupying the land, Party B, is also given a fictitious name, Richard Roe. This legal setup allows the court to treat it as a personal claim in the form of a tenancy dispute and to efficiently settle the issues without the formality of real property claims.
That makes sense. It also seems like it would be a good way to remove bias from situations. We're not making it about this one person. We're making it about a concept.
Exactly. They could present ownership claims as part of the evidence, but it didn't require that proof of ownership going back, however many 100 years in order to determine who, deserved to be there. All right. Now that we've provided everyone with an unasked for lesson in legal customs.
Riveting legal overview. Thank you for that.
Y'all don't know how much I had to read to
to narrow it down into that.
Yeah. We're going to move on to the next example. We've now moved out of the 1500s, folks.
Woohoo!
The next work was published in 1681. Author acknowledgement is given to one who is a citizen of London and an inhabitant of the borough of Southwark. The work is titled A Seasonable Answer to a Late Pamphlet entitled The Vindication of Slingsby Bethel, Esquire, one of the sheriffs of London and Middlesex. It's quite a name. Here's an excerpt. Quote, the misled men who crowded for him might as easily have been persuaded to give their votes for John Doe and Richard Roe. End quote. In this example, John Doe and Richard Roe are used as placeholders for hypothetical individuals rather than representing real or specific people. Now, Jane Doe started showing up in the early 1700s. It was likely used prior to this, but we have evidence in print as early as 1703 in the work of Last Wills and Testaments, a common law treatise of Great Britain. Quote, a device of rent to Jane Doe for life, and if she marry or accept of any legacy, the rent shall cease and return to the executor. End quote.
Oh, I see. Okay. So this is a hypothetical female who maybe their husband or father or someone has died, and then she can have these things basically as or stay there, I guess, unless she remarries.
Correct. Yeah. So this established basic rules for how to handle those situations, but also provided a sort of template where an actual legal name could be placed, in the place of Jane Doe. Up next, we have an example of the names being used as placeholders for real people. This comes from the work The Outport Collector and Comptroller's Guide, or A Complete View of the Method of Collecting the Duties on Coals, Coal, and Cinders, etc., by William Hunter, published in 1764. Quote, the collector and comptroller of the coal duty to examine and report, by order of the commissioners. We conceive that the allowance of discount is in consideration of the duties being paid within 15 working days, which time being elapsed in the present case, and the duties not paid, the discount consequently cannot be allowed, unless your honors please to direct it should, and whether there are any circumstances in this case to induce your honors to grant that favor is submitted. John Doe, Collector, Richard Roe, Comptroller. End quote.
Okay.
Basically, they were asking if the discounts on duties or fees could still be given despite the deadline for payment not being met. John Doe and Richard Roe were used as pseudonyms for the collector and comptroller, respectively, to preserve anonymity.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
Because nobody who's the collector wants their name out there, folks.
Well, yeah, I would think it's not just that, but you're also, like, this would... in America's capitalism, driven society, we are past the point where companies or people who are collecting debts or anything are even worried about you knowing who they are, right?
Right.
But I would imagine at this time frame, they definitely didn't want to put their name out there. Like, yeah, I know they didn't pay, and so therefore we think we would like to establish a precedent by which we can remove some of the discounts, and now they're going to owe us even more than they did before.
Right.
That's what we'd
It's
like to
kinda
do.
like,
I'm not going to put my name on it because I'll get murdered in my house.
So this was also a common practice just generally because it also helped kind of focus on the status that a person held as opposed to their name, their individual name. And so it's like, this is the collector, this is the comptroller, like that's the part that matters, not what the name of the individual is. So it had, both things there. The book John Doe and Richard Roe, or Episodes of Life in New York by Edward S. Gould, was published in 1862. Here's a synopsis from Kessinger Publishing, who reprinted the book in 2010.
Hey, that's actually good job for you getting your book republished in 2010.
Right.
Some, 110 years, 190? Math is hard. A long time ago later. 150?
Just like
150-ish. Hang on. I can do this.
Okay.
I'm a big boy. I have this. 2010 minus 1862 equals 148.
Yeah, there we go.
I got it in one when I said 150-ish.
Yes.
As if that's the only thing I said.
It is impressive to get your book republished that much later.
All right, so what is this synopsis?
Quote, the story follows the lives of two young men, John Doe and Richard Roe, as they navigate the bustling city of New York in the mid-19th century. The novel explores themes of ambition, love, and morality as the two protagonists encounter a variety of characters and situations that challenge their beliefs and values. Along the way, they become embroiled in political scandals, romantic entanglements, and personal struggles, all while striving to achieve their dreams and make a name for themselves in the city. End quote.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm like, if your name is John Doe and you're trying to make a name for yourself, that's literally the epitome of anonymity.
So,
here's the thing. If you want to make a name for yourself and you were named John Doe,
pick a different
change your name. That's your first step.
Make a name for yourself. That would be the first step.
Because as we've seen, for at least 300 years prior, John Doe was anonymity.
It kind of meant everyone and no one at the same time. So... At this point, the practice of using the names John Doe and Jane Doe was common when the identity of a person was either unknown or needed to be protected. By the late 1800s, the practice expanded to coroners and law enforcement, who began using the name to label unidentified deceased individuals. This was especially useful in cases where the body of the deceased could not be immediately identified, such as in accidents, homicides, or cases of abandoned bodies. Because of the nature and content related to this usage, we're going to leave out the specifics.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't need any more than that. That covered what I needed to know.
Yeah. It kind of, it makes sense. It was naturally something that they just don't know a name. They're going to put something there so that it's not
you're going to
blank.
put something there. And John Doe and Jane Doe and Richard Roe, these were all pseudonyms for an unknown person or an anonymous person already.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, it makes total sense that we would have eventually moved this practice to deceased individuals when we really started tracking deaths and making death certificates and those types of things.
Yeah. In the early 1900s, John Doe was used as a placeholder for all sorts of things. One common occurrence was its use on mock ballots for political elections. This is seen in the Idaho Republican, May 6, 1910, out of Blackfoot, Idaho. The article gives instructions for voting, how to mark the ballot, and then displays a list of options such as U.S. Senator, State Representative, Governor, and so on. Under each title is a list of 3 names to indicate they will be able to choose who to vote for. However, every name on the ballot is John Doe.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's that sample ballot. Yeah.
I've definitely seen this in some things where they were given an example of something that was of like a form that was completed, and they used John Doe and they used the kind of Hollywood thing for a phone number. It's 555, 555-5555, and then like 123 Anywhere Street or whatever,
yes,
as the stand-in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So interesting.
Meet John Doe is a 1941 movie starring Gary Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck. Here's the synopsis from Rotten Tomatoes. Quote, a reporter writes a fictitious column about a man named John Doe who claims to despair at America's neglect of the little people and plans to kill himself. The newspaper then hires a ball player turned hobo to pose as John Doe. In a series of radio addresses written by a publisher with fascist leanings, Doe captures the public's imagination. When he finally realizes he has been used, Doe comes to his senses and becomes the man he never knew he could be. End quote.
This gives me mad Captain Tuttle vibes from MASH.
It's like so many things are happening in this one synopsis that...
Well, it was 1941, so
Yeah.
fascism on the rise in Europe at that point would have definitely been something that would be in the minds of Americans.
Yeah, so, and I like Gary Cooper, so I'm like, maybe I'll watch this. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see how that was portrayed from that time frame there. By this point, the name John Doe was used so frequently that it became as common to find in print as names like John Smith, which is
gotcha.
wild.
or the
not an
Joneses
actual person.
family,
Yeah,
like we talked about in Keeping Up with the Joneses.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
We have several modern uses to cover, and we'll get to those right after we say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is sponsored by our amazing patrons on Patreon. And the cool thing about Patreon is it is 100% free to join the Bunny Trails community. We have new things every weekday on the feeds. On Mondays, we have a conversation about what movies, shows, books, podcasts, and whatever else everyone is enjoying. Tuesdays see early access to the week's podcast. Wednesdays have all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode. Thursday has patrons-only polls. And Fridays are our lightly edited, behind-the-scenes video featuring all the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts you could imagine.
We've got some other pretty cool stuff too, like original digital artwork once a month made by me, and direct access to talk with us. No algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe does every episode. And our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsig Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon.
That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
We're going to start off our modern uses with the well-known court case Roe v. Wade. Through this case, many people learned that Roe was a pseudonym with historical significance in court cases. Again, legal proceedings are complicated, so I'm going to make this overview as straightforward as possible. The issue in Roe v. Wade was whether Texas laws criminalizing most abortions were constitutional. Roe argued that these laws violated a woman's right to privacy, which she claimed was protected by the 14th Amendment Due Process Clause. On January 22, 1973, the Supreme Court, in a 7-2 ruling, decided in favor of Roe's argument. This landmark ruling significantly impacted reproductive rights and sparked ongoing debates over abortion in the U.S. The ruling was overturned by the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization decision in 2022. For this case, the plaintiff used the pseudonym Jane Roe. Using Jane Roe allowed the plaintiff to maintain anonymity while also keeping the case name unique from the many that used the more common placeholder Jane Doe. So this was an intentional decision to use Roe as opposed to Doe.
Yeah, that makes sense. It also makes sense to use a pseudonym of of any sort, and of course Jane Roe makes even more sense when you think about it from that perspective. But this has in the United States, and still this obviously was decided in 1973, overturned in 2022, and is still today a very hot button topic in politics and. I imagine it will continue to be so for the foreseeable future.
Yes.
Regardless of what decisions are made to reinstate or continue to have it overturned.
Right. This was also a time when the pseudonym was used for the protection of an individual on a larger scale. A lot of times it's to protect them from other individuals as opposed to groups. And this was definitely a lot of people that would be potentially targeting the person. So.
Yeah, we've definitely seen a lot of America. Unfortunately, seen a lot of domestic terrorism that revolves around abortion in the United States.
Yeah. Well, John Doe is the stage name of vocalist and bassist from the band X.
I feel like this band should have sued Twitter.
Yeah. X, formerly known as Twitter. That's what I usually call it.
That's what everyone in the news media calls it. X, formerly known as Twitter. And I'm like, okay, why? Like, I don't know how many years afterwards does it have to be X before you stop calling it Twitter? Before you stop saying formerly known as Twitter.
I mean, Prince went back to being Prince.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm
but he's like the artist formerly known as Prince and is also known as Prince again.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yeah, who knows?
Well, since the name John Doe carries certain connotations of anonymity and everyman qualities, it might have appealed to this John Doe for its universal and neutral qualities. Here's a comment on the name from his official website. Quote, John Doe was born in 1977 when he arrived in Los Angeles. His previous life in Tennessee, Wisconsin, and Baltimore was a great and fertile time, but new music and social changes led him to events that created a life in art. End quote.
That is a very interesting thing. I wonder how old the body that John Doe inhabited was in 1977 when he was reborn in Los Angeles.
It's hard to tell.
I mean, who knows? And you know what? It seems like he's done a little bit to try and keep his anonymity, and I'm not going to go pick it up to try and go find out more.
I'm leaving that one alone.
I'm sure someone has and someone could in today's world, but I'm okay with letting people have anonymity so long as they're not causing major problems. If he just wants to be anonymous to play in a band, then good for you, John Doe. Go for it, I guess.
Do the music thing. John Doe is a TV series that aired in 2002. Here is a little bit about it from TV Guide. Quote,
is TV Guide still a thing?
Yes, apparently.
Okay. I quit really watching TV in the late 90s, but I definitely we would get the TV Guide, we'd pick it up anytime anything was happening that we really wanted to see. We would pick it up at the grocery store in the checkout line, and it literally had like, this is what's airing, but it also had music or not music. It always had articles and other things in it.
Yeah, it did. It had like some puzzles and some little and funny jokes. I liked some of the funny stories in there were entertaining to me.
All right. Well, here you go. TV Guide still
TV
around.
Guide. Quote, a man who knows literally everything except his own identity helps the Seattle police solve crimes as he tries to figure out who he is and where he came from. The high-concept sci-fi series had its loyal fans, but just not enough of them to get it renewed for a second season. End quote. John Doe is a song by rapper B.O.B. or Bob, originally recorded featuring the artist Priscilla. Here are some of the lyrics. Quote, seems like your heart stops working the minute they close the curtain and take off your mask and take off your costume. And if anyone asks, you're taking a small break, drinking some coffee. But everyone knows what you're doing. Seems like the bus moves slower just because you got somewhere to go. So you take a few pills in Beverly Hills, but if anyone asks, you've got a prescription. You've got an addiction. Who do you think that you're fooling? John Doe, I just want the John I know. Once you put the drinks on hold, maybe you could come back home. End quote. So, a little bit sad topic there, but I found an acoustic version of the song that he did with JoJo in 2014, and I really enjoyed listening to that version of it, so that's the one that I think we'll link to and share. John Doe is the title of a visual novel/game. Here is a description found on tvtropes.org. Quote, John Doe is a surreal horror visual novel/dating sim style game. The game is quite short, with 7 endings, which can all be achieved in about 15 minutes. You play you, a cashier at a gas station. On your way to work, you meet John Doe, a strange fellow with an unsettling aura and weird habits. At this point, it's up to you whether you decide to romance him or not, at your own risk, of course. End quote. This media has some pretty dark themes and it has a mature rating. The character from this story, though, fills pages and pages of results when searching art related to John Doe. It's a very popular character, apparently, in the last couple of years. John Doe is a company that designs protective motorcycle clothing and gear. Their goal is simple, quote, "We want you to feel just as well dressed on your motorcycle as you do in everyday life, with the highest safety standards," end quote.
That makes sense. I mean, some people like, the girls go crazy about a sharp-dressed man, ZZ Top said.
Right. Their clothes are really cool. Their website, ridejohndoe.com, provides a breakdown of how protection is integrated into each piece. One item I like is the moto shirt. It's a button-up that comes in different patterns and colors. I like the gray and black plaid, as well as the black denim style. It has an internal layer of their protective XTM fiber, and then additional protectors at the back, elbow, and shoulders. Plus, they look pretty awesome. Given unlimited funds, I would buy some of these items for my son who rides a motorcycle. So, yeah.
If I had unlimited funds, I'd pay your son not to ride a motorcycle ever again. That seems safer. But you'd be taking away his agency, so.
That's taken away a little bit of agency, but yeah.
But I have all the money in the world, so now I'd be a billionaire or a trillionaire or whatever, and I could do whatever I want with no worry about what other people are doing anyway.
If I really have all of that, then what instead I'll do is put those like bumper things that they have on bowling alleys just everywhere that he rides his motorcycle.
That's funny.
Like, you
just
can
get him a
still
driver.
ride, it's fine.
That's funny.
Well, whether we're trying to catch a suspect or refer to an everyday person, the use of John Doe is both useful and, to me, a little odd. It's a concept almost everyone in the English-speaking world is familiar with, which is what makes it feel so strange, I think. We've universally accepted that John Doe represents a random, possibly fictitious or hypothetical person, or even a placeholder for a real one. It's a way of offering information without truly giving any, which, in a way, I find appealing. We've managed to label something that, by definition, remains undefined. It's a simple yet fascinating quirk of language that speaks to the complexities of identity and anonymity. That's about all we have for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop culture references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
It is Patrons Poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons, what is your favorite American candy? We provided a list of the top 10 best-selling candies in the United States, according to So Sweet Shop, which is a UK-based candy shop, so I don't know if that means they would know better or they wouldn't know as much. But anyway, the competition was fierce, but a few sweets came out on top. Snickers, M&M's, and Kit Kat tied for the top. Apparently, these classics never disappoint. Reese's Peanut Butter Cups and Twix came in strong next, while Hershey's Milk Chocolate Bar and Jolly Rancher tied for the next spots. As for Skittles, Starburst, Sour Patch Kids, and their fellow fruity contenders, well, they just weren't as popular. This round clearly belonged to the chocolate lovers. We also asked folks if they had a favorite that wasn't on their list. Heather said, quote, "As for what's not on the list, I love Baby Ruth. Maybe because it's not as common in grocery checkout lines as some of these listed are, so it's a rarer treat," end quote. Pat said, quote, "Oh yeah, I have tried and enjoyed every item on this list. Apparently, I go more for chocolate these days. I used to love those Valentine's Sweethearts, the original candies with the little phrases like be mine and cutie pie and wink wink. And the Reese's promotional candy like Santa Clauses and Easter bunnies are an occasional one-time-a-season treat. Peeps are only good for decorating, in my opinion," end quote. I agree with you, Pat. Peeps, actually, I'm not even sure they're good for decorating, but you do you on that front. But I agree with you, Pat. Jeez. Absolutely.
Jan said, quote, "I'll go Jolly Ranchers from the list. Watermelon first, but orange, peach, and lemon are close behind. I'm pretty fond of Heath bars, too," end quote. Jan, finally, someone else who loves the fruity candies.
That is your thing.
I am a candy lover in general, and the sour gummies typically top the list for me. That being said, I do love chocolate, so I understand it being the crowd favorite. I could start talking about what candies aren't on the list, but we'd be here for days. Though I'm going to mention the amazingness of Nerds clusters. They're chewy and crunchy and sour and sweet and super addictive.
Well, as we've established on the show, I don't have much of a sweet tooth, but when I do get the craving, I am all over the Reese's peanut butter cups and holiday blobs, plus Snickers and Twix, and peanut butter M&Ms. For those not on the list, I like Heath and Score bars, and then Reese's Pieces.
Okay.
Normally, if I'm going to end up with those, they're probably in an ice cream thing or a mix of some sort, But since I don't do lactose all that well anymore these days. I probably never did. I just notice it a lot more as I get a little bit older. My body does weird things, but anyway, I still So when I have the craving for sweets, any of those things are going to work for me.
Okay.
Well, as a reminder, our silly polls mean absolutely nothing and are not scientifically valid, and patrons of all levels, including our free tiers, can take part. Head over to patreon.com/bunnytrailspod to take this week's poll. Thanks for joining us. We will talk to you again next week. Until then, remember, words belong to their users.